make you guys wait any longer. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Annie and I'm the district parent liaison. I'm the one that brings any resources or workshops to you guys. If you have any ideas or any information you would like to see, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you again for taking the time today. This is a very important topic that we'll be discussing tonight, and I'll go ahead and hand it over. We are very lucky to have Rocky Harron with us tonight. He's a former DEA agent, and he has been giving this presentation many times for the past years and all over the world. So we are very lucky to have him tonight.
Well, thanks, Annie, and thank you everybody for tuning in. This is actually better turnout than I'd hoped for. Sometimes I do these parent events and there's no participation. It's still very low participation for the size of the San Marcos School District, but I'm grateful to you all for tuning in. Small group, I'm going to go very quickly, and the presentation I'm going to give you tonight is designed for parents and adults, but it shows a lot of the same topics that I use with the kids. And if you have any questions or concerns, please put them in the chat. I'll give you all my contact information at the end, and you can reach out to me privately if you don't want to talk tonight, for any reason. So I was at Woodland Park Middle School this morning. I did 2 90-minute assemblies, about 600 or 700 kids each. They went beautifully. As normally happens, I had about a dozen kids come up crying after the assemblies to share with me, terrible sadness that they're living because somebody in the family's in addiction or somebody has died of an overdose. And those are just the kids that come up to me. And I've been teaching, I was a DEA agent for 31 years, and I've been teaching drug prevention in schools for 17 years. And I started when I discovered my own kids weren't receiving any organized drug prevention in schools. 17 years ago, I was perplexed and shocked that the schools weren't doing it. And for 17 years, I've been hoping for schools to start doing it, and they're not. So I'm grateful to Annie, and I'm grateful to my friends in the county who worked to get me into the schools. But unbelievably, we're still at a place in society where what I do is not normal, it's not regular, and it's not mandated. And I have I'm retired from DEA. I was a DEA agent for 31 years, and I'm hoping that I get put out of work. I'll be very happy when the school districts call me up and say, Rocky, we don't need you anymore because we just got funding to do something that's much better than what you can do for the kids. So I'm going to jump into my presentation. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Annie, we can stop the conversation at any time if we need to stop Annie and address a question. So I call my presentation a perfect storm. Can you see it, Annie? Are we good? Okay. So I call my presentation a perfect storm. And what I mean by that is we have a situation where the drugs are more dangerous than ever, and our kids are more vulnerable than ever. And it's not turning out well for society. We focus on the immediate consequences of substance abuse. We focus on overdose, we focus on the homeless, we focus on crime, we focus on drug seizures. But if we take a step back, there's a lot of other areas in society that are being very negatively impacted by substance abuse. And these 5 areas are crucial in society. Kids are failing at home. The home environment is toxic. School failure. For years, we've known about the connection between teen suicide and substance abuse. Absolute connection between juvenile crime and substance abuse. And then we're not talking near enough about our homeless problem, in the sense that it's my belief, and having talked to many homeless people, they ended up on the streets, but they started their path of substance abuse when they were in middle or high school to self-medicate, and we didn't address it. In schools, it presents as absenteeism, learning disabilities and failures, discipline issues, and the unsafe school environment. And we're spending a lot of money and effort trying to mitigate these problems on the back end. And I always wonder, what could we do if society would give me and people like me 5%, just 5% of the money we're spending trying to mitigate these issues, and let us do it on true prevention, on drug prevention, on self-esteem building, on social media awareness, and all these things, I think we'd have a lot fewer problems in our schools. I show this picture of the kids because right now I'm an old bald man and they don't want to listen to me. That's a picture of me when I started in DEA 34 years ago. And I show this because I want the kids to understand I know what I'm talking about. And they laugh, but it works. And I tell them, since this young age until this old age, I have seen what drug abuse does to beautiful people just like you. I worked 8 years at San Diego, and then I was rewarded with a transfer to Bolivia for DEA. And I went down there for 6.5 years, and I helped the Bolivian police fight the cocaine trafficking problem. And before I went, I was taught Spanish, and our government trained me as, the American advisor. That's what I was. That's who I was. To go down and help them with their problem. Everybody in Washington called it their problem. And they manufacture cocaine in thousands of little laboratories like this in the countryside to hide from us. They don't make it in big labs that are easy to find. And every day when they're done making the cocaine with these poisonous chemicals, they just dump it in the ground in the water, and literally poisoning an entire country. And I realized something, this isn't their problem, because the cocaine that comes from those labs is going to be sold here. And the money used to build those laboratories comes from the pockets of American drug users. And these are things I teach your kids. I'm teaching all the same stuff to your kids. Now, cocaine, when it gets here, is a pretty white powder that people glamorize very much. But I show your kids how it starts. That green sludge, that's also cocaine. And that pit is full of nasty, nasty chemicals. And no matter how clean any drug looks when it gets to your kids, they're also going to be consuming trace amounts of the toxic chemicals used to make it. And in fact, we still have a problem where people who use cocaine chronically in the United States have noses that collapse and flatten because those toxic chemicals eat at their bodies. Crystal meth, the worst drug I've ever seen, still. And allegedly we're in a fentanyl crisis, and I'll talk about fentanyl tonight. But I don't say we're in a fentanyl crisis. I say we're in a drug crisis, because this drug is flooding into our country in quantities that we can't even imagine, and we're not even talking about it. And when I started my career, it was being manufactured by the Hells Angels in North County, in Vista and San Marcos and Escondido. And back in the 90s, if we would take a pound of meth from the Hells Angels, that was considered a significant seizure. But as I retired 3 years ago, I'm taking 100 pounds of the stuff, 200 pounds, 500 pounds of it coming up from Mexico, and the drug cartels are laughing at us. They don't care. No matter how much we seize, no matter how many people we arrest, they just send more. Fentanyl, never in our worst nightmares did we imagine that we'd have a drug this toxic and this dangerous in our high schools and in our middle schools. And then, marijuana. I enjoyed doing some gardening when I was in DEA. I hate it all. I hate it all. And I explained to the kids that this is all being produced and grown to get money from them and control over them. It's the alcohol industry works that way. The nicotine, cigarettes and vape industry works that way. The marijuana industry works that way. And the illegal drug business works that way. They want our kids to start using it. They want our kids to get hooked on it. And they want our kids to give them their money, no matter what these substances do to them. These are headlines from our country. 13-year-olds are dying. Not too many of them, but it's happening regularly. This kid died in middle school from an overdose, and people were upset. So they wanted to figure out who gave the kid the drugs, and they discovered he was the drug dealer. Now, obviously, there was some adult behind him, but they found 100 baggies of fentanyl in his bedroom and 45 baggies in a backpack at school that he left when he died. And I asked your kids, I asked the kids at Woodland Park this morning, when that 13-year-old is bringing fentanyl to his friends in his school, is he saying, hey, here you go, you probably shouldn't use it because it might kill you? Or is he just saying, hey, look what I got, let's do this? And the kids they all know what they're going to say. I was teaching in North Dakota just a month ago, little Williston, North Dakota, and they just arrested a 14-year-old ninth grader who took 20 fentanyl pills to her ninth grade class. So this problem is everywhere in America. This unbelievable headline is a real headline. 5-year-old who fatally shot his baby brother with a gun was on cocaine while the dead toddler had marijuana in his system. That bizarre, sick headline is an actual headline from our country. And, I used to have, when I started teaching 17 years ago, I'd have to look for these kinds of stories. Now I'm afraid to open the news because stories like this are hitting me in the face every day. And what's so vexing and intolerable for me is our society is not reacting. I mean, we're all seeing the headlines. It's been building up, and the stats keep getting worse and worse, and yet we're still essentially doing nothing different for our kids. In California, we don't want to charge anybody with crimes anymore, but they're charging this teenager with 16-year-old with murder because he distributed fentanyl to a 12-year-old. And I explain that to your kids. The drugs today are so dangerous that if you give a drug or sell a drug to some friend and they die, you may get charged with homicide. This mom took her 2-year-old son to the park for an outing. Before she could stop a little man, he picked up a blue thing off the ground and ate a fentanyl pill that somebody had dropped. This family took their daughter on vacation to Florida and put her down for a nap, and they found her dead from a fentanyl overdose. And the authorities said, well, we couldn't find fentanyl there. Well, that baby found fentanyl in that house. And it turns out the previous renters had a big drug party there. And obviously somebody left fentanyl wherever it was that baby went down for her nap. Alcohol, nobody's talking about alcohol. And this is very tragic. Alcohol consumption began to climb again during the lockdowns in adults. And there was a corresponding increase in adults condoning alcohol consumption in their kids. And this is the most dangerous drug ever sold. We're talking about drug overdose tonight, and I will give you some stats, but alcohol death far exceeds drug death. And we're not even remotely talking about alcohol with our kids. And then marijuana. I don't have an easy job. I go into schools in California, or Colorado, or Montana, wherever I'm teaching, and I try and convince these kids in states where it's been legalized that it's dangerous. And a common response from high school kids is, why are you talking about weed? It's not a drug. And they're not joking when they say it. They believe that because we've let the marijuana industry tell our kids thousands of times that it's not a drug. The industry that sells it's telling kids this is natural substance. It's going to make them more creative, more relaxed, whatever it's going to do to them. And yet we have this national news story about San Diego, just San Diego. And it's almost 37, almost on average, 37 kids, almost 40 kids a day going into severe mental health crisis like psychosis using today's super powerful marijuana. And many people dispute this. They think, well, they must be using other substances. They're not. It's what they're consuming is so much more potent than anything that ever existed before. The potency of this stuff is so toxic, kids are actually dying from it. The number one cause of juvenile poisoning in America from kids 0 to 5 now is these THC gummies. We had the case in Escondido last year where an 8-year-old grabbed some gummies from his dad, took them to school, and gave them to 3 friends, and all 4 kids consumed a toxic amount of THC, and one of the kids was in a coma for more than a week. And I've met that family twice, and that little boy's still not right. And it's just a miracle that it wasn't fentanyl, or it hasn't happened yet that some little kid finds fentanyl pills that look like candy and takes them to school to give them to their friends. I don't think we're in a fentanyl crisis. Fentanyl sucks, and it's the scary drug of today, but it's part of a much bigger problem. I think we have a drug crisis because we have a self-medication crisis. If we as adults go to doctors and say, hey, we're stressed, we're not sleeping, we're anxious, the first thing they tell us is, what do you want? What prescription do you want? They don't tell us to meditate or exercise or moderate our diet. And so many of us are seeking escape through chemicals because we're in a mental unwellness crisis. I'm not qualified to call it mental illness, but our kids are not well mentally. And I argue that many of adults are not well mentally. And for me, what's behind all of that is a crisis of connection. We're not connected with our families. We're not connected with our spirituality. We're not connected with our country. We're not connected with much at all right now. And people are drifting and they're looking for answers. Our kids are telling us they're not well. They're telling us they are not well. The CDC did these national survey of mental health of kids, and the data is unbelievable. At first I didn't believe the data, but I read up on it. The data is solid. 44% of American teenagers told us that they feel persistently sad and hopeless. I mean, think about that for a second. We are the richest country in the history of the world, and yet 44% of our teenagers nationwide told us they feel persistently sad and hopeless. Now, 2 years ago when this data came out, I naively said, well, our country won't stand for this. We'll fight back. And I was wrong. I expected this would cause some kind of high-level conversations nationwide, like, why are so many American teenagers so messed up? And it didn't. We just ignore these data, and our kids are telling us they need help, we're not giving it to them. And too many people want to throw all the blame on the phones and social media. I don't like the phones. I'm addicted to mine too. They affected my kids. My kids were kind of the first generation to have the phones, and it didn't work very well, particularly for one of my daughters. But I don't think the phones have done much more than accelerate, the problems we've already been having. The phones have just made them grow faster and bigger than like they were before. The drug problem, I do know very well. Drugs today available to all of us, including our kids, are stronger. They're easier to get. They're cheaper, and they're more socially acceptable. And that's not changing, and in fact, it's getting worse. And as bad as everything that I'm going to talk about tonight is, if you come back to this session next year, we have to share with you that it'll be worse because the drug traffickers are inventing ever more toxic substances. I am a former law enforcement guy. I believe in law enforcement. I have many friends who still are in law enforcement, and they seem to continue to believe that law enforcement can make a difference. I disagree. I think where we are right now with the drug cartels in Mexico and the toxic politics between Mexico and the United States, that we can't do much to restrict how much of these synthetic drugs the cartels are producing and pumping in the United States. But I do think collectively, we can work against number 4. And that's, what I'm personally trying to do in our schools. There's many ways to measure the drug problem. All right. We count the amount of drugs we seize. When I was a cop, we count the people we arrested. Another sad way is to count the overdose death, count the dead. When I started in DEA in 1990, it was just under 10,000 Americans a year dying from drugs. Today, that's changed. Now it's almost 10,000 a month. 10,000 Americans a month. Beautiful, unique people full of dreams are dying monthly because when they started using drugs, they either didn't know the consequences of using, they didn't think about the consequences of using, or I think more often they just somehow convinced themselves that it wouldn't be them, right? I mean, nobody starts using drugs convinced that it's going to impact them. That 10,000 a month is about 300 a day, every day. And we're not doing anything different. I mean, we talk about it, there's some headlines, but there's no real change that I'm seeing. But I realize if I throw numbers at our kids, they don't understand. We're not losing numbers. So I made this video to show everybody we're not losing numbers. These are all people that died from overdoses. Some are famous, most are not. You'll see their smiling face, their name, the age they died, and drugs that killed them. And I asked you, and I asked the kids who watch this, if getting high was worth the price that you paid.
Should have stayed. Were the signs I ignored? Can I help you not to hurt anymore? We saw brilliance when the world was asleep. There are things that we can have but can't keep. If they say, who cares if one more light goes out in the sky of a million stars? It flickers, flickers. Who cares when someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, or quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. The reminders pull the floor from your feet. In the kitchen, one more chair than you need. Oh, and you're angry, and you should be. It's not fair. Just 'cause you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. If they say, who cares if one more light goes out in the sky of a million stars? It flickers, flickers. Who cares when someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, or quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. Who cares if one more light goes out in the sky of a million stars? It flickers, flickers. Who cares when someone's time runs out? If a moment is all we are, or quicker, quicker. Who cares if one more light goes out? Well, I do. Well,
compared to hearing numbers, doesn't it? You know, and that video is magic. When I'm with a middle school audience or an elementary school audience, and it happened today at Woodland Park, when it gets down to the kids like 12 and under, the whole audience starts to emote and they go 12, 9. And when it's done, I say, now you know why I'm here. And now you also know you're not safe just because you're young, right? Because that's a great risk factor in our kids. They somehow think that they can do really stupid things and they're going to be fine because they're young. And I have to educate them on that. All right. So, you know, but who are we not tabulating? So after my talks, I've had hundreds of kids come up to me to share incredible sadness with me. And like a dozen kids today did it. And I hug them and I listen to their story. And sometimes I cry with them and I grab them by the shoulders and I say, look, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It doesn't have to be your future. And to send them on their way. And I do that because the kids that are suffering from someone else's drug abuse, they do blame themselves. They do think it's their fault. They somehow think they weren't worthy as children. And it's a great tragedy for me that we have so many kids everywhere I go who are living in this unthinkable pain. And we're not counting them. We don't seem as a society to care about them too much. Who else gets hurt? There's little boys in the car with the dad and the dad's girlfriend in Ohio. The adults injected heroin in the car in front of the kid, and we're driving around. You know, it's a normal day for them. But during the drive, the woman began to overdose from her heroin and die in the car. And her boyfriend panicked, tried to get to the hospital to save her. And on the way to the hospital, he passed out from his overdose while driving. The vehicle went out of control. And that little man in the back seat, 4 years old, thinks the dad's dead, thinks the girlfriend's dead. You see the police officer's arm coming through the window. This incident is just happening. I mean, the cops were so shocked, they're taking pictures. And that little kid, I think we'd all agree that child's in a pretty heavy nightmare. But when we look on his face, we don't see him reacting as if he were in a nightmare. And in fact, he's just sitting there. Look at his hands. He's just sitting there staring because he's used to it. And I've consulted with many child development experts, and they all agree with me that the only explanation for this is he's just used to it. You know, no love, no nurture, no food, 4 years old, experiencing this trauma. You know, and who's he going to be at 14? Who is he going to be at 24 when he has his own kids? And I tell my youth audiences that I'm fighting for those little boys and girls. And if I could protect them all myself, I would, but I can't. And I say, I want your help. I need your help. And to help me, you don't have to become a DE agent. I tell them, if you want to help me, you start by making a decision today to say no thank you the next time somebody offers you drugs. And that's a message I repeat throughout my talk. To avoid all this sadness, to avoid all this life destruction, to keep your dreams on track, all you need to do is say no thank you the next time somebody offers you drugs. There's just so many stories across America of the sadness. I have my own daughters. You know, they're now 28, 26, and 23. I make the joke, I blame them for me being bald. You know, it's hard getting kids through adolescence, as many of you would agree. But I tried very hard to keep my girls away from drugs and alcohol when they were in school, and I failed. And I'm not going to tell you the stories, but you know, my youngest daughter, when she was 11, was staying with her best friend every weekend to get away from the bullying from her older sisters. And I knew the family, very prominent family. The mother's a law professor and a recruiter for one of America's most famous universities. And her little girl, my daughter's best friend, was essentially guaranteed admission to that university at birth. But I didn't know that family had a 17-year-old son who liked to smoke marijuana. And they didn't tell me this, but they got marijuana for their 17-year-old son so he could smoke it at home, so he wouldn't get in trouble with other people. Well, his 11-year-old sister meant, in her mind, that meant it was okay for her too. So for more than a year, my 11-year-old daughter was getting stoned on this stolen marijuana. And I'd pick her up on Sundays, and I thought she was tired from not sleeping. And it never occurred to me that my daughter was smoking weed all weekend, every weekend. 5 years later, we get in a fight about something else. I accuse my daughter of lying to me, and I accused her of using drugs. And my little girl looks at me and goes, Dad, I don't use drugs anymore. And she explained this whole story to me. And I said, well, when did you stop? And thank God you stopped, but when? And she goes, well, I think I was in 7th grade, maybe 8th. And I realized that I didn't like what marijuana was doing to me. So my little girl on her own saw that just smoking today's marijuana on the weekends was changing her motivation and changing her personality. And she stopped. Her best friend got pregnant at 16, dropped out of school. Now she's a lovely single mom with 2 kids at 23 years old. You know, marijuana didn't kill that young woman, but she didn't go to that university, and it changed her life trajectory, you know, when she went hard in the marijuana. And it's just, I just tell you that story because, it never occurred to me that family would have that going on. So if you have kids that are, you should get to know the parents. Maybe you should ask questions of what the parents' attitude is about drinking, about using weed, to make sure you don't get some nasty surprises like I got. I teach my laws of substance abuse. I explain to the kids it starts as a choice. I, in fact, talked to a guy today, a tribal guy from the Palo Reservation, who was forced to use meth when he was 10. But most people, it's a choice. And I tell the kids, you can lie. You can tell that person that you don't feel right today in the head, you don't want to use anything. You can tell them you'll think about it. You can tell them you'll use it next time. Whatever lie you have to tell them. Then I explain the best answer that you can give is, no thanks, I don't do that. Or no thanks, I don't do that anymore. And, one of the reasons I don't often do parent events anymore is the 30 of you who are tuned in tonight, you're not really the ones we need to worry about. It's the other 99.9% of the parents who aren't tuning into sessions like this. But, I would encourage you to have conversations with your kids about this. Hey, are you prepared? If somebody offers you drugs or alcohol, are you prepared? How are you going to answer? And come up with some answers that'll work for your kid in your context. Law number two, everyone experiences negative consequences eventually. The example I like to use is alcohol. And I'll tell the kids, it might be funny to have some relative who gets drunk at parties to become the life of the party. That might be funny. But how much fun is it living with that person when they become an alcoholic in your family? And it doesn't matter where I go around the world, the kids look at me and go, no fun. Every audience I talk to, everywhere in the world, the kids answer that in a way that tells me they're suffering right now from someone's alcoholism. And then law number three, those negative changes that will come to you, the damage you do to yourself will never just hurt you. It'll hurt everybody who loves you, everybody who supports you, everybody who teaches you, and in fact, it'll hurt the rest of society. We don't talk enough about brain development. I think everybody watching knows that a child's brain continues developing until 24 or 25 years old. And we're not really thinking enough about the damage our kids are doing to themselves when they drink and use drugs before that. But we can look inside of people now. We have scans. And this chart shows pictures of images of humans, a blood flow in the human brain. On top, you see somebody not using substances and you see very even blood flow. But you go around the chart and you see people using different substances and you see what looks like holes in their brains. Those are not holes. What this shows is areas of reduced blood flow. So this guy drinking, at 45 years old, drinking the alcohol, he has slowed down or stopped the blood flow to those parts of his brain. That's why they look like holes in this image. But the 17-year-old's doing the same thing to himself. And I ask the kids, can you see that happening? And they go, no. And in fact, if we ask a teenager today in California, are you hurting yourself using weed? They'll just laugh. They laugh at the question. But science can show now that this kid, since he was 13 years old, has been turning off those parts of his brain when he's high on THC. Well, if they're turned off and aren't working, that also means they're turned off from growing. It's incremental brain damage. It just adds up a little bit every time. Maybe no one notices it externally. Maybe it's not obvious to people around that kid. But in fact, that young person will never be who they could have been otherwise. And so I tell the kids, look, if you're thinking about using weed in your life, I can't stop you, but I can ask you to wait until you're an adult and that you're doing it legally and you're doing it when your own brain is mostly done growing. I explain that drug dealers that our kids meet will lie to them. Drug dealers are not good people at any age. I don't care if they're 13 or 50. They'll look at our lovely children and our family members and they'll lie. This is a case of mine. This family in Mexico was taping heroin to the body of their little 1-year-old son to smuggle it from Tijuana to San Diego, and we caught them. And I asked the kids to look at that picture and ask themselves, if that family cared so little for the welfare of their own little boy bringing that drug into San Diego, how much would they care about people in San Diego being hurt by the drug? And the kids answer 0. This is a fascinating video. The Vice Network managed to interview a woman in Colombia. She manufactures a horrible new synthetic drug called 2CB, pink cocaine. It's in the US, it's not big yet, but I find this interview just fascinating to hear what she says about this drug that she makes and sells.
Really?
Sí, ya no es solamente Colombia. Nuestro cliente es los Estados Unidos. Ese es nuestro verdadero cliente.
The product you've created, this pink powder, it's not really 2CB. It's kind of a mix of lots of other random drugs, isn't it? So is it a way to kind of make a lot of money off of a cheap mixture of leftover drugs, basically?
Sí. Es una mezcla y, o sea, no es el propio Tusi, no, jamás.
Is it
Sorry.
all basically just a very clever marketing ploy?
Sí,
It is.
es claro.
It's a very clever way to make a drug more marketable by giving it a distinct color.
Parece inofensivo, el color rosado parece inofensivo. Es lo que más atrae pues a la persona.
Have you tried it before? Have any of you tried it before?
Nosotros no consumimos. Sabemos el daño que produce en el sistema nervioso central. Aquí lo que se logra es captar a la persona y dejarla ahí para que sea nuestro cliente potencial. Nosotros no vamos porque que le esté pasando algo a su familia, a su casa, no. Nosotros simplemente vendemos, ellos verán si consumen.
I hope you all caught what she was saying. She doesn't know what's in it, doesn't care what's in it. She makes it pink so it sells better. She doesn't use it or let her people use it because she knows it damages their brains. And she doesn't care what happens to the people who use it. She just wants them addicted. The violence in Mexico is unbelievable. It's legendary. Hopefully you're all aware of that. And I feel personally responsible as an American for what we are causing in Mexico. I blame the United States for the violence in Mexico. And I feel very lonely making that statement, because our national policy right now is to point the finger and blame Mexico for our drug problem. That's a satellite picture of San Diego and Tijuana. I'm a native San Diego, and I've been everywhere, and I don't want to live anywhere else. I love it here. And Tijuana is our sister city. From space, you really can't even tell it's two cities. But we share the oceans and the beaches and the mountains. But we know there's a border there. And the reality is quite different, because San Diego is one of the safest big cities in America, and Tijuana is one of the top 3 most violent cities in the world every year. Our sister city, you can't even tell them apart, really. And half of this picture is the most violent city in the world. And the only explanation for that is that's where all that American drug money is hitting Mexico. Look at the murder rates. Tijuana is smaller than San Diego. The blue numbers are murders in San Diego, and the reds in Tijuana, year over year over year. And those assassins, all of them, are being paid by the money that American drug users give to their drug dealers. Sorry, I had that. And then I asked the kids. I told the kids today at Woodland Park, I said, hey, look, do your friends who are feeling anxious or lonely or depressed, are they going and discussing all their problems with their friends to work through it, or are they disappearing into their phones? In every youth audience I have, they go, they're disappearing in their phones, because that's exactly what kids are doing today. They're not talking to their friends about their problems. They're just withdrawing into the artificial world of the cell phone. And then those kids go home and they're not talking to their families, because this is what's going on. And I am guilty of this. I have enormous regrets, like profound, that I did this to my kids. I had to be super special agent Rocky. I was gone all the time. When I was home, my phone was ringing. I thought I was saving the world with my stupid investigations, and I can never get that time back with my daughters. And I'm hoping that you're not making the same mistake with your kids. And if you are, reflect on that. But I think too many of our kids are not talking to their friends about their problems. They're coming home, they're not talking to their families about their problems. And when they look on social media, now we got a problem. Because when the kids look on social media, what they think they see is everybody else having a better life. They think they see everybody else with the friendships and the relationships and the parties and the clothes and the vacations and whatever that they don't have. And I think because of that, for the first time in history, kids today, your kids, are coming to think that they are uniquely broken if they feel sad or lonely or anxious. And that's scary. And I think it may have, and I'm hardly an expert on this one, but I think it may have a lot to do with the increase in teen suicide issue, because I think kids are coming to think they're the only ones who are broken. And I explained to them that that's such a ridiculous thing, because all of us, everybody in this Zoom, when we were teenagers, we experienced anxiety and loneliness and depression as teens. It's never been easy to transition from a child to an adult. And life expects you to learn how to overcome those challenges with your natural gifts and talents. But we live in a society that tells all of us, kids and adults, no. If you're feeling sad, here, drink this, smoke this, pop this. And it's not working well. It's not working out well for society. And then, of course, our kids are getting just absurd influences through the phones. We're not remotely giving kids enough guidance on the phones. I mean, there's no filter. When I was a kid, my dad could lock the door at night, and the outside world stayed outside. And my kids were kind of the first generation with smartphones, and I realized I can't protect my kids anymore. They're either through the computer or the phone or their friend's phone. They're going to be going places and seeing things on the internet they're not going to tell anybody about. and our kids are having to figure this out on their own. And I call this a tragic moment. And that's when that young person in pain, anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, they use the alcohol or drugs. And some of them discover that they like it. And some of them have a problem because their own brain says, I want more of this. And their own brain will tell them to lie to themselves. And they will. And the kids will say, I'll just do it one more time. I'll just do it one more time. I'll just do it one more time. And with the super potent drugs today, very quickly, they're in addiction, and that's a lifelong problem. This is terrifying. This is new. When I was young, drug use was a social thing. And I'm not going to say that weren't individual kids who used it privately, but it was a social problem. But look at this. We're finding that a huge number of our kids are using it alone. They're self-medicating alone with today's drugs. And that's really scary for number of reasons. Number one, obviously, if they have some kind of a critical medical incident on that drug, there's no one there to see them. And this is something I added a couple years ago, and this is really powerful. This is what gets all those kids to come up to me afterwards to share, things they're living. And I say, look, this is the reality of living in substance abuse. And if you're living any of this, I tell the kids, look at me. And they do. And I say, if you're living any of this, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. I say it very powerfully. And I say, the reason I bring this up, because I know that most kids who suffer from this, they do blame themselves. The kids feel that it's their fault somehow, that, they're not good enough kid, their parents, they're not lovable, whatever the poor kids think. And I say, look, if you're living this, it's not your fault. And please go get help. Find somebody at the school to trust. Because even though you might tell me today that you would never do this to your own kids, the young people who live under these conditions who don't get help, when they have the kids in the future, and I'll ask the guy I did today, I'll ask the audience, when these kids who are suffering from this today don't get help and don't learn a different way of being, what do they actually do in the future when they have their own kids? And some kid will shout out the same thing. And we all know that's true. We've all experienced it in our families, the world around us, the generational trauma, the generational violence. So that's something I'm also trying to break, with this work with the kids. Opioids. I love this meme. You don't take them, they take you. When I was young, we worried about heroin. We don't have to worry about heroin anymore. We got rid of that problem only to have it replaced by this one. Fentanyl, it causes the same high as heroin, the same addiction as heroin. It's just 50 times stronger. It's not the most dangerous drug. Carfentanil is 100 times stronger. The nitazene class, a new class of drugs out there, is 50 times stronger than fentanyl. But fentanyl today is the big boogeyman drug. And because it's so powerful, when the drug dealers make the smallest mistake in how they dosage it, our children die. Too many adults think it's pharmaceutical fentanyl. We used to have this problem. 10 years ago, we had people trying to get this kind of fentanyl from pharmacies to abuse it. This fentanyl is a miracle drug. It's used in surgery and burn treatment and cancer treatment every day. It's not the problem. This is the problem. Fentanyl used to come directly from China. The government actually did some controls, and now China sends the chemicals to Mexico so that the cartels can manufacture it in Mexico. And that's where most of it is coming from. There is some coming from Canada. There are some people in the US who are manufacturing it here in the US, but 90-something% of the fentanyl in America is pouring in from Mexico. And one of the problems we have is our kids think that if it came from a pharmacy, it's not dangerous. That's not true. And I explain that every single pill, that pharmaceutical pill, it looks like a pharmaceutical pill that shows up at their friend's house or the party or at the beach or for sale on Snapchat or Instagram today is a fake made in Mexico from fentanyl. And the reason these pills are so deadly is in this diagram. These pills aren't made by scientists. They're made by idiot drug dealers. And these idiot drug dealers take the green sugar, they mix in the fentanyl, they try to blend it properly. And as you can see represented below, they don't produce pills with the same quantity. Some of the pills have none, some have enough to cause a high, and some will kill anybody who takes it. They all look identical. There's no testing, there's no quality control. They're being produced by the millions, flooding into our country by the millions. And the only time we found out a pill is deadly when someone's calling 911 for our child or our child's calling 911 for somebody else. These are pills I seized in my investigations in San Diego. I was an expert. I thought these were legitimate from pharmacy, and I was quite wrong. The quality in these pills is ridiculous. Even our expert chemists in the DEA cannot tell them apart by looking at them. There's no way our kids can tell if they're fake or not. First case I worked, we're seizing 1,000 pills at a time, in 2016, hidden in these blankets. 4 years later, we're seizing 100,000 pills at a time, coming across in cars, and now they're coming across millions at a time in tractor trailers. Millions of these things just flooding in our country. These pills used to retail for $30 each. Now, in many parts of America, including San Diego, they're maybe $2 each. The pill that will kill your child or destroy their quality of life forever is retailing for $2. And now they're not even faking it. Now they're making them pretty colors because they know we have a huge population in America that just wants their fentanyl. Ironically, we have this problem. 20-something years ago, Americans in huge numbers started abusing prescription drugs because they thought they were safer from street drugs. Now, so many people are terrified of the fake prescription drugs that they've returned to using the powdered street drugs like meth and coke. And they don't understand that fentanyl comes in bricks of powder like this. And they buy what they think is meth or coke and they die because it was either just fentanyl or mixed with fentanyl. And fentanyl in the candy is not a new thing. This is from 3 years ago. We have fentanyl that looks like little Valentine's candies. It really is, to me, sort of a miracle. We haven't had some big mass casualty incident at a school with some little kid who grabs a handful of these things and shares them with the classmates. There was an article I just read this week. There was a school field trip somewhere, and after it was middle schoolers. And after the field trip, the bus driver was sweeping up the bus, and there was a bunch of fentanyl pills that were on the floor of that bus. They have no idea where those things came from. Narcan is an antidote for an opioid overdose. So someone who is overdosing on heroin or fentanyl or OxyContin might be saved by Narcan. And it's in all of our schools. The problem is people are giving it too much credit. I think our political leaders, our school leaders, when they get it in the school, they say, okay, now I can wash my hands. Now I've addressed the drug problem. And they haven't, because Narcan is nothing more than an emergency answer, no more than a fire extinguisher. Fire extinguisher is not a fire prevention policy in a school. And Narcan is not a drug prevention policy. So I continue to push for our education leaders and our civic leaders to understand that we have to do a lot more for our kids to be actually, protecting them in a way that makes sense. And as bad as it is today, it's going to get worse. The drug cartels have the Breaking Bad guy working for them. They have PhD chemists looking for new drugs that are cheaper and stronger to get to our kids. Methamphetamine does not look dangerous. This picture does not look like it's a dangerous drug that we know it is. And they can dissolve it in acetone and add food coloring and then make pink crystals or blue crystals and lie and tell our kids it's safe. And then I finished talking about marijuana and vaping. I go pretty heavy on that now. I'm not going to kill you guys with it, but I go very, very heavy on that in the schools because we have an epidemic now of kids who are in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade who are addicted to the vapes. The kids think that it's a water vapor. That's why the industry that makes these things chose the name vape. There's no water in it. It's flavored propylene glycol, flavored formaldehyde, and flavored nicotine. But our kids think it's flavored water vapor. And I talk about addiction issues with vaping. I have a slide where I show a guy who had surgery from cancer and he's still smoking through a little stoma in his throat. And I asked, why would this guy keep smoking? He's addicted. And for the first time ever, I told the kids in the school, I said, look, if you're vaping, these are middle schoolers in San Marcos. I said, if you're vaping, odds are good you're already addicted. And if you keep doing it, if you're not addicted already, you'll be addicted. And so what I said is, you've got to make a choice. Both choices are going to be uncomfortable. You can make the uncomfortable choice of continuing to use the vape and getting more and more addicted to the nicotine, making it harder to live a normal life. Or you can make the uncomfortable choice of finding someone in the school that you trust and asking for help. Both choices are going to be uncomfortable. One will lead you to light and the other will lead you to dark. And then marijuana. I need you to understand it is not the same marijuana. Too many adults don't get it still. When I was in middle school in San Diego, my friends tried to get me to smoke weed, and it was that natural marijuana, the 4% THC. THC is the drug that gets you high. Bob Marley smoked the 4% and got famously high on it. My friends got plenty stoned off that 4%. But the marijuana industry today doesn't grow the 4% plant. They grow a genetically modified hybrid plant that produces 25 to 30% THC in the plant. So a young person smoking a joint today is potentially taking in 6 or 7 or 8 times as much THC as my friends did when they smoked it. And even my most stoner friends did not consume THC at those levels. But the kids tell us they don't even want to smoke the joints. They want to use the concentrates. And the potency of this garbage is often more than 90%. And I think too many adults don't pay attention to that. If too many adults if they hear their kid was using marijuana, they don't ask, or they're using the 4% natural stuff, or are they using the 95% concentrate in a vape or a pen or an edible? And it's like, if your kid got drunk at a party, I think you'd ask, well, were they drinking beer or were they drinking vodka? Because I think, the old marijuana, maybe we can compare to a 12-ounce beer, and the new is like drinking 12 shots of vodka. It's a very different impact in the kids. And I love this video. This is a doctor. She was in Sweden. Now she's in New York. But I'd like you to hear what she says about the youth using marijuana.
It's now clear that what was once considered a socially acceptable drug is anything but. And it's research that's taking place here in Sweden that shows just how dangerous cannabis can be. We're now being told that teenagers in particular are not only at real risk of a psychiatric illness, but that cannabis can damage their brain for life.
We have two hemispheres of the brain, and cannabis has an effect all over the brain because the receptors where cannabis binds to are located throughout here, our cortex, our cerebellum for motor coordination.
Professor Yasmin Hurd from Sweden's Karolinska Institute is one of the world's leading brain researchers. She has discovered cannabis can have a profound and lasting impact on the developing teenage brain.
Early cannabis exposure changes the chemical makeup of the brain and therefore how it processes information. And those brain regions that it's changed in are very important for emotional processing and for the underlying disorders related to psychiatric illnesses such as schizophrenia, drug addiction.
You say the scientific data is there to show that there is a direct link between cannabis and psychosis.
Definitely. There are studies now worldwide that have shown this. The earlier you use cannabis, and kids now are using it earlier and earlier, the greater the effect on the brain. So it's cannabis with development.
How young are we talking here?
You have kids starting at 10, 11 years old.
The adolescent brain is particularly vulnerable. As it matures, indicated here in blue, it becomes hardwired. Cannabis can disturb the chemical balance of the brain, causing psychosis.
And there are many adults who argue with me on this. And to me, it's not arguable. There is overwhelming science now that today's super powerful marijuana is damaging to the youth brain development. But I tell the kids that I've got a tough job because many of them smoke it, their families smoke it, their celebrities smoke it, or whatever, they consume it in whatever form. And I think some kids at this point in my presentation think I'm lying, that I'm exaggerating, I'm making up the harm. And I say, look, if you think I'm lying to you, then you do the science yourself. Prove me wrong. Do this Google search teen brain damage marijuana and find some of the science, because the only science that you're going to find if you do that is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles documenting how dangerous it is for kids. But our society is messed up in many ways. This is one that particularly frustrates me. We give kids help when it comes to drugs only after they've hurt themselves. Once they're in juvenile justice system for selling drugs to buy their own, or they're found in addiction, or they're living on the streets, and then maybe somebody offers them a rehab program. The purpose of my work is to get all of your kids, all of them, this information, whether they want it or not, so that whenever it happens the next time that somebody offers your kid drugs, your child will be more powerful and more prepared to say no, thank you. The program I came up with is I Choose My Future. It's not just say no. My presentation is designed to reach as many kids as I can, which is not all of them. I've talked to 235,000 kids now in 1,250 of these assemblies. I've done this a couple times. And if I have 1,000 kids in front of me, I'm not trying to reach all 1,000. I think 100 of them aren't going to listen to anything I have to say. They're just going to have to learn. They're knuckleheads. They're going to have to learn the hard way. And I think 100 or so, we don't need to worry about them. For whatever reason, they're just not going to go down the use of drugs. But I think I'm trying to reach the 80% in the middle who are persuadable. And so I want kids who aren't using to not start. I want kids who are using to reconsider, go no further. If I have some kid who's using marijuana today and doesn't stop using marijuana, but because of what I taught does not go on to use fentanyl or use meth, I'll take that as a win. We can't measure that, but I'll take it as a win because I believe that's happening. And of course, I want those legions of kids who are hurting from someone else's alcoholism or drug abuse to profoundly understand that it's not their fault. There's lots of argument about which age is appropriate. Many schools now are letting me come and talk to 5th and 6th graders now, which is crazy. 10 years ago, high schools were saying I was too triggering emotionally, and now elementary school kids are hearing it. Today, I'm talking to your 6th and 7th graders. They understood everything I was talking about. And then high school. Escondido High School gave me 90-minute assemblies with their kids a couple years ago, and this is a letter I got from a high school senior in Escondido.
Dear Rocky, thank you for the work you've done in fighting against drugs. Your words hit deeply, as my parents had substance abuse problems, so much that they eventually lost themselves to their vice. They aren't dead, well, at least to my knowledge, but they chose the substances that they loved over me. I have to live with my brother, their son, who barely knows anything about living because my parents could not stand to parent me. As a senior, it still hurts, and although it always will, at least I have your words to propel me forward when I suddenly reach hard points of life, because giving up is easy, but pushing onwards is harder. Even though you weren't able to finish your presentation, your words got to me at the first sentence. Hopefully, you can reach other children and young adults like myself across the globe. Sincerely, a student at Escondido High School.
What a lovely gift from that sad, high school senior. The reason I couldn't finish that assembly is one of the kids called in a bomb threat to shut down my assembly, which it did. But there are some kids in our schools who do not want this message. They self-identify so strongly with drug abuse. So the theory that I use is the teaching theory is this one, self-determination theory. My program is called I Choose My Future. Throughout the program, I tell the kids, you will decide who you become in the future. You will be the architect of your life. You will find happiness if you work for it. And I teach competence. I teach them the truth about the drugs that are around them today. And then I connect it to the things they already know about their lives. And it works. And the kids sit there and they listen and they cheer when we're done. But it's hard for me to get in schools. And I think too many adults think this is what's happening in these assemblies.
Now, as I was saying, drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs. If you do them, you're bad, because drugs are bad, okay? It's a bad thing to do drugs, so don't be bad by doing drugs, okay? That'd be bad. Drugs are bad.
And the kids laugh and they're looking at me because they know I look exactly like Mr. Mackey. But I use that clip because there are still people trying to talk to today's kids with a message like that. And it's never worked. It's been on South Park for 30 years because it's been a joke. That's not how kids want to learn today. So I've come up with my style, which is very direct. It's in your face and it's very honest. Torrey Pines High School is a very strange place, very privileged school. My friend who taught there took this picture, said he's never seen those 2,000 kids off their phones listening to anybody like they were listening to me. And sadly, that same teacher knows 19 of his former students who've died from overdose from one of America's finest high schools. And then I travel around the world teaching. I teach in Mexico and I teach in these other countries, and I'm fluent in Spanish. And what amazed me was, as I travel around the world, I don't have to change anything. I don't have to make any changes to make my program culturally relevant in these far off places, because these kids around the world are watching the same garbage that your kids are watching. The same garbage movies and TV shows and music videos and TikTok videos, glorifying and normalizing and glamorizing drug use. And your kids know it's lies. These kids know it's lies. But too many of them give into that pressure anyway. I was worried the Marine Corps, these young studly Marines, I was afraid they wouldn't resonate with my message. I gave them the same thing I teach your kids, and look at that reaction. And in talking to these guys, it turns out half of them, at least, joined the Marine Corps specifically to get away from some misery and suffering wherever they grew up. And then these are kids in a prison in San Diego. We have 2 juvenile prisons in San Diego. And these kids don't want to hear me when I show up. This group was particularly horrible to me. But I didn't quit in the face of their verbal insults and flipping me off the entire time. And because I didn't quit, something changed. By the time I was done, these young men who hate everybody, they didn't respect anybody. And I said to them, if you respect my message, we stand for a picture. And they chose to stand because they finally understood what I'm trying to do is prevent the childhood trauma that created them, right? All of it connected to drug abuse. I get to meet cool people, in my work. Mike Tyson supports what I'm doing. I'm going to be inducted into the National Boxing Hall of Fame along with Evander Holyfield there in a month as a humanitarian. So I'm getting cool support from different places, and I'll accept it. I'll take help from anybody who'll give it. This is in Redding, California. I've gone up there several times now. They bus all their kids in from across the county to these central locations. This is 1,500 13-year-olds after my presentation. 1, 2, 3. And that's, I show that because I can't change a child's decisions. I'm not going to be with your kid at the party tapping them on the shoulder. But if I can change their attitude about using drugs, then, you know, hopefully on their own, they'll make the right decision. How we message matters. Most kids, you know, that I talk to, most of them, not all, but most of them seem to appreciate the presentation. They seem to say it makes some impact on them. You know, these are kids in the prison, 81%. They hated me when I showed up, and when I was done, 81% said they thought it was worth their time. And I'm going to keep doing it. So I'm proud of what I teach. I'm grateful that I have some opportunities to work with the San Marcos district, but I have a resource that you can take home tonight. So I can't, San Diego's got 750 schools. I can't be everywhere. So we created a video series of my messaging, and these are the 6 different chapters, and they're all 10 to 20 minutes long. We made them short enough so any teacher could use them in a classroom session, but they're also designed for parents, because, you know, as much as we hopefully can do when we do an assembly, it's not very much. And the true conversation needs to happen in your home environment, you know, with you, with your grandkids, with, you know, whoever the young people are in your life. And so what I would encourage you to do is sit down with those kids in your lives and watch these videos with them. Don't you watch them alone. Don't send them off to watch them. Hang on, I got an old-fashioned clock here, sorry. So, you know, sit down and use these videos to create the conversation. When the video's done, say, hey, that guy Rocky, is what he talked about, is that what you're seeing? You know, you can always come talk to me, right? Make yourself a safe place. And I'm going to show you a very short clip from chapter 5. The production value is incredible in these things. I was really, really pleased with how they came out.
History now with marijuana. Same thing. Nobody dies of one puff, but vaping can have a lot more nicotine than tobacco cigarettes. People think, oh, it's just vaping. As an emergency physician, I could tell you that last week we had a 17-year-old who was just vaping, who ended up in the ICU in a coma. I think the best way to deal with kids is to be honest. Not everybody who uses marijuana is going to get psychosis or schizophrenia, but it's a risk. Not everybody who smokes cigarettes is going to get lung cancer or emphysema, but it's a risk. I'm not there to tell people don't use drugs. I'm there that you should know about drugs and hopefully make this decision to protect your brain.
Trying to convince you that the vaping of nicotine or using marijuana is dangerous is not an easy job, because you've been told thousands of times by giant corporations, by celebrities, and by so many others that it's not dangerous. You've been told that vapes are just fun and have no harmful effects. They tell you that marijuana is, quote, natural, that it will make you better and more creative people. Many of you have tried it, and many of you live in environments where using it may seem normal. Because of that, you might think I'm making up this harm or even lying about this information that marijuana damages young people. But if you think I'm making up this information and you think I'm lying to you, I have a simple challenge for you. Prove me wrong. Do a Google search for teen brain damage marijuana.
Okay, so you get the idea. Those videos are all accessible at that link on top. And that's my email, and I have my own personal website. So if you have questions for me now, I'll be happy to answer them. If you want to reach out to me privately for some concerns that you have, I will give you any answers I can. If I don't have the answer, I'll find somebody that does. You know, I'm here to be a resource for the community. I'm here to be a resource for the San Marcos Unified School District. And again, I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. This was actually much better participation than I expected. So thank you.
I have a question. It's got 2 parts. One, you mentioned up front that you were just going to Woodland Park this year. So what kind of drug education are the other schools getting, like during Red Ribbon Week, when we're told to send our kids wearing red? And the other part is for those of us with kids younger. I have a 1st grader, but just wanted to hear your presentation in anticipation of, but we're kind of alarmed about, you know, babies picking up fentanyl and stuff like that. How do we go about having that conversation with him?
So to the first question, I don't know what your schools are doing. I work across the county, and I'm just running from school to school to school. So the schools that don't use me, they may be doing something. I think the San Marcos schools are using Project Alert, which is a kind of a curriculum program. So I believe they're getting something more than most schools get. If they're not using me, maybe they're using somebody else to do the assembly. I don't know. I can't answer that. But what I do tell you is you can start with, I started with very little. My kids were little, and my kids still made some mistakes with peer pressure, but I started very little with my kids about, respecting the body and keeping your body clean. And if I saw somebody smoking, I go, ooh, icky, why would somebody put these things in their body? So I think that's my recommendation on how you start. Start very young and just make the conversation about being healthy and respecting your body and your integrity. But certainly by the time your kids are in 3rd or 4th grade, I don't think it's too early to start talking about marijuana and vaping. There are some schools, I won't mention schools, there are some schools in crisis right now in the county, because they've got kids in 5th and 6th grade, large numbers addicted. And we have a real problem because our schools are not able to cope with that. And, and nobody would go to an adult cigarette smoker. None of you would go to somebody in your life who smoked cigarettes, an adult, and say, hey, give me your cigarettes, you're done smoking. We wouldn't try it because it wouldn't work. But that's what schools are doing. They catch a kid at school with a vape, they grab the vape, they sanction the kid, they call the parents, they think they've dealt with it as a discipline issue. And then lo and behold, the kid shows up the next day with some other form of nicotine because they're addicted. So again, I start the conversation very, very early. Make yourself a safe place. Revisit the conversation. Like, hey, what are you hearing about? What are your friends doing? If you ever need to talk to me, talk to me. That's the best advice I can give you.
But in terms of even explaining to them what a drug is and how, do you recommend they not
No, I did
from friends?
I did with my kids. What I didn't understand was how bad the peer pressure was. So that's kind of where I fell down. I didn't ask enough questions of their friends. I didn't revisit, like the cobbler's kids have no shoes. I was assuming that my kids got the message, and actually, I regret that I didn't go back and kind of revisit my own kid's message. So I think personally, I started talking very young age about drugs, and the kids in my experience, the kids understand. They understand way more than we want them to. They're looking at the movies and TV shows. They're looking at their older siblings and their relatives. So I think it's okay. I personally think it's okay to start talking about the hard drugs. And I don't buy into the notion that by telling kids about how dangerous chemicals are, that somehow we're gonna create curiosity in our kids to go try the chemicals. I don't think that's a real issue for me.
And do you recommend that they don't take candy from their friends, or?
That's thank you for bringing that up. So I was at a middle school in Solana Beach last year, and a girl came up to me afterwards crying and talking about some things. And she goes, yeah, a friend of mine gave me some candy and I started to eat it. And I asked her where she got it from. And she said, some other kid just gave it to me. And the girl told me she spit it out. A middle schooler told me she spit it out. And I had to think about that. And I'm like, dang, and I said, you know what? I'm sorry that you had to think like that, but good on you. So yes, actually, with I don't think it's a super elevated threat, but it is happening. That little kids are bringing candies to school and sharing, drug candies to school, and they're sharing it with their friends. So that's probably not a bad conversation to have. And I'm glad you asked that question. I'm going to have to think about including that in my future talks. That might be something we really need to take a hard look at anymore. If it didn't come from a teacher or an adult, you just don't take it. Don't trust your friends.
Do schools have Narcan on campus? And
yeah, I think every school in San Diego, at least middle and high schools, has it. Maybe elementaries. Statistically, kids aren't using fentanyl at school, so it's not. It's good to have, but most of the kids that we're finding who have deceased from fentanyl use, they're doing it alone. They're doing it in the bathroom or the bedroom. Then they're not doing it in a place where Narcan would help them. So Narcan's good to have. If you have someone in your family who's using drugs, I would recommend absolutely you get Narcan. I think the sheriff's stations give it out free, I think. I think you can go get your health insurance to give it to you through a pharmacy. So it's not bad to have it, but you got to recognize it has pretty profound limitations. And odds are very good that your child's not going to use fentanyl around you so that you can see them if they have a problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Annie, should I put my email in the chat? Would you guys like me to put my email in the chat?
Yeah, if you can add it to the chat, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll do it right now. But you can call me, you can email me. I'm here to be a resource for the community. I am very grateful that you guys chose to tune in tonight. I don't have answers for everything, but I'm looking for them. We're trying to find out how to be more supportive to our kids. So, and I would encourage you to call your schools, call your schools and say, hey, what are you doing? Ask the school principal, what are you doing to educate our kids? Engage in that conversation. And if they're not doing enough for you, then encourage them. I have a very good friend, Casey Strang, who's in this Zoom. Casey works in the North County Prevention Coalition. He's been trying to support the North County community for a very long time with resources. I know Annie and the school district. So I will tell all of you listening, my advice to you, if you suspect your child is using drugs, treat it as a very serious health problem. This is not the 20 years ago problem, because you just don't know what your kid's going to be using. Your kid doesn't know what they're using. So I would treat any suspected drug use in your child as a serious issue. And I think the first place to go is the counselor at your kid's school. And the counselor at Woodland Park's fabulous. The counselors in most places I go are fabulous. Go to that school counselor and say, look, I've got suspicions. What do you recommend that I do? And I think that'd be a great place to start. But if you notice that your child had a lump under their skin, I don't think any of us would sit there and say, well, I'll just figure this out on my own, or we'll just wait and see what happens. I think most of us would run to the doctor to get some professional help. And I think today, if you have a child that you suspect is using drugs, I would run and get some professional help just to make sure, that you're not behind a much bigger problem.
To be clear, is the school counselor the health aide that they go to for a bruised knee, or is that somebody different?
No. So like the gal who organized my talk today at Woodland Park, she's some kind of a licensed counselor. She has like her office is set up very calmly. If they have kids who are in mental health crisis, to go in and talk to her. She's a licensed professional, and she's very well educated professionally on all of these issues. And she's wired into the community resources that would be available to you in your community to deal with your child. And then they'll know your child, or they can certainly start paying closer attention to your child if you bring up these concerns. And then they can work with you to help figure out a solution that works best for your child and your family.
And if you need help trying to reach anyone at your school, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put in my information in the chat as well. You should also be able to find them if you go to your school site. They should have their information of who your counselor or social worker are for your specific school.
All right. Well, look, again, Annie, thanks for organizing this. All of you, thank you for tuning in tonight. Hopefully it was of some benefit to you. My information's there, and and those videos are free. And if you have kids in your life, I'm going to encourage you to just, take the time, sit down and watch one of those things every so often, and get that conversation started at your home. So
one